Welcome to FreightWaves. Today, it is hump day. It's also the best day of the week, which is the weekly American Association of Railroads weekly tonnage index. We're going to get to that later in the show, so stay tuned. We're going to find out how the industrial economy is performing. Our guest today, we have a lot of things to talk about. We're going to dive deep into the insurance conversation and the liability conversation, something that's getting a lot of news, a lot of attention since Montgomery, but is also these nuclear lawsuits that keep piling up. We're going to dive into that today. We've got folks from the insurance industry. We got folks from the legal practice. They're going to tell us all about how to interpret these various events that keep piling up. It feels like so much is happening, Malcolm.
So much is coming to a head right now as we are in the thick of it, of Super Bowl week in trucking. And it's a lot. We got a lot to get to.
And there is nothing cold whatsoever about right now in the United States. This is a heat advisory. We'll talk about the impact of that on freight. Refrigerated is absolutely hot.
Oh, I like the fun that you just made.
I got the
You're
jokes.
on it. You're on it.
I got it. I bring it every day here at FreightWaves Today. But what's interesting about that is that now, because it's so hot, 114 degrees, which I'll talk about on my Sonar update.
Of course.
114 degree heat advisory inside a Sonar. And one of the things that happens is that there are certain commodities, things like chemicals even, wine, that they will not normally haul in temperature controlled refrigerated. Like you think about like chocolate and ice cream, those things are obvious, dairy.
Right.
But there is a time when it gets so hot, particularly over a holiday weekend, that you've got to use a temperature controlled trailer. We're going to talk about what the impact of that is, because this is absolutely a very hot weekend. And it's a weekend that a lot of beverages move. You got water. I moved a lot of water. I moved a lot of beer. I moved a lot of soda. That's all happening this week. Let's get to the headlines, and then we're going to get right into all of the action that's happening this week in freight.
We kick things off in Washington, where a major Supreme Court ruling is dramatically reshaping presidential control over independent regulatory agencies. The U.S. Supreme Court yesterday issued a 6-3 decision in Trump versus Slaughter, ruling that President Trump can remove members of the Federal Trade Commission without having to show cause, such as poor performance or misconduct. The ruling overturns a 1935 precedent and is likely to decide the fate of Robert E. Primus, the longtime Democratic member of the Surface Transportation Board, whom Trump fired last August, without citing any specific reason. The decision directly affects the STB, which regulates the nation's freight railroads, approves mergers, sets some rates, and resolves disputes between railroads and shippers. With Primus removed and the board currently shorthanded, President Trump can now appoint replacements more easily aligned with his policies, just as the STB faces a massive proposed merger between Union Pacific and Norfolk Southern, the largest rail merger ever. Over in the ocean shipping sector, Israel's flag carrier is officially under new leadership today. Chen Lichtenstein, as of July 1st, officially succeeds Eli Glickman at Zim Integrated Shipping Services. Glickman resigned in April following a failed attempt to acquire the company, which was taken over by Germany's Hapag-Lloyd in February for $4.2 billion. Haifa-based Zim in April credited Glickman with leading an astounding turnaround in reshaping the carrier as an agile, digitally focused global player on major trade routes, ranked 10th in the world by capacity at just under 700,000 20-foot equivalent units. Lichtenstein is a graduate of Stanford Law School who most recently served as an advisor to investor KKR, and Glickman expressed full confidence in his successor's ability to continue building on Zim's strong foundation. Finally, electric truck fleets are discovering that mastering charging strategy might be even more critical than the chargers themselves. Better Fleet CEO Dan Hilson told FreightWaves that the freight industry's decades-old diesel fueling playbook completely breaks down when managing 30 or more electric trucks, where charging windows, demand charges, time of use pricing, battery degradation, and grid constraints multiply fast. In California, time of use pricing creates a brutal penalty window from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m., the exact hours many drivers return to depot, and demand charges in some energy markets can reset a fleet's entire annual energy bill if instantaneous power draw spikes past a threshold for even 1 minute of the year. Better Fleet's platform uses machine learning to stagger charging across dense networks of slower chargers, throttling power to stay below demand thresholds, while scheduling the bulk of energy draw during off-peak windows, delivering what Hilson calls enormous savings, even for customers running multiple charger brands across a single site.
It feels like electric vehicles, autonomous, are really the topics. A couple of days ago, someone on X said, "Why are you all of a sudden talking about autonomous trucks?" I'm like, "Have you been paying attention to the news? They're all over the place. There've been so many announcements." Dad, you're here. Max Fuller is the founder and CEO of U.S. Express, former CEO. Now, you guys sold to Knight Swift, but you were the founder.
Right.
No one could ever take that title from you, which is the great thing about founders' roles. You're always the founder. The world of autonomous and EVs is getting a lot of attention. We heard earlier this week about the Tesla Semi. What are your thoughts on sort of the world of the equipment?
Well, I think long term, we're going to see autonomous become the norm. I also think that you're going to see electrics probably play a big role. Now, is it going to be electric or is it going to be hydrogen? And I'd probably lean more towards the hydrogen side just because of the electric grids and how far behind we are in the build out. And then also, with all these data centers popping up with all that demand, I think trucks will probably lose that battle.
That's a great point. There's a competition for grid space with data centers. These guys have unlimited money. Right. And there's so much investment. That's a great point. And trucks are intensive. Now, we have heard this week, we talked about it, the fights that drivers, one of our, it was the CEO of Next Energy, told us that drivers are having physical altercations with the right to drive the Tesla Semi. You've been out and you've seen the Tesla Semi years ago when it first came out of production. Right. Any thoughts? Do you think that's a legit thing that drivers are really wanting to drive the Tesla Semi?
Well, I think some drivers really like new technology, and I think some drivers run from it, and it's been that way for years. I mean, we had satellite communications, and people said they wouldn't drive a truck with satellite, and then once they experienced it, then they wanted to have a truck that had satellite because they got dispatched faster because we knew where they were at.
Yeah,
so technologies are coming on pretty strong.
I drove, I've got an electric car. I said, I was telling you yesterday, when I was in Salt Lake City, I rented the same exact car, but it's an internal combustion engine. I gotta tell you, I prefer the electric. And this was like, I was renting the internal combustion engine because that's what they had for rental.
Of course.
And I found the electric had much better handling. It was obviously quieter, but it also just the response in the acceleration. It was a better ride. Yeah. And I because it's the same exact car that I own, I noticed the difference. I was able to compare and contrast. And I think that's probably for drivers is important.
Well, the electric motor responds very fast compared to the mechanical engine. It takes several seconds for the mechanical engine to create the torque. Electric, it's instant.
Plus, there's no noise. That's the other problem that you get in the diesel in the cab. That's always an issue for drivers. We've got a lot to talk about. Stay with us. We're going to get right to it. We have Ted Bassett. He is the head of personal injury law firm group at Mirick. Ted, welcome to FreightWaves today. You've got some guts to come here. We're not very friendly to plaintiffs' attorneys. Tell us why you are here to talk to us.
Well, I'm very happy to be here, and maybe I can change your mind about plaintiffs' attorneys. We're not all the same. I've enjoyed a pleasant career, and hopefully I can shed some light on any issues that you may have.
Look, I think there are times when plaintiffs' attorneys do God's work because they get rid of the riffraff. There's also times that you guys are accused of being ambulance chasers, rightfully so. Maybe it's not you, but some of the other folks that are out there get a bad rep. Why should the industry respect plaintiffs' attorneys and the work that you guys do?
Well, you just made a good point. I represent people who have been injured through no fault of their own, whether it be a construction accident where the general contractor failed to put up any kind of fail safety system, it went up on a roof, tried to tie off, and there was no rope up there. Or I have represented clients that have been in accidents where a elevator cable broke and it hadn't been inspected for a long time. I represent people without any charge at all if we don't win, and I help people. And so it's been a wonderful career for me representing people that have been hurt, and they need representation. And I'll tell you, for one thing, the insurance industry makes it very difficult for those people to collect anything reasonable without an attorney. And it's too bad that we're necessary, but when people need help, we're here. And I used to do medical malpractice defense work, and the only thing I could do would not lose, and then have the insurance company all over my back. Why did you spend a half an hour doing this, doing that? So I'm on the right side, and if I bring a bad suit, I'm going to get nothing, and I'm also going to get criticized by the court, or I might lose my license. So the phrase ambulance chasers, that's where the injured people are. And there are unscrupulous lawyers, like there are unscrupulous drivers, unscrupulous brokers, those types of things. But I can't defend the whole profession. But I will tell you, I've been practicing 48 years. And when I started practice, lawyers were the most respected profession ever. And the same thing with doctors. And now we're at the bottom of the list along with car dealers. So we've done something wrong, that's for sure. But hopefully, if you or a family member or someone who's been hurt badly needs some help, you'll find a good plaintiff's attorney to work you through the process and get you hopefully a fair result.
Well, Ted, if it makes you feel any better, journalists and media people, I think, rank lower than we're in the same category as congressional folks, which are apparently the least respected profession in America. So much for prestige.
Well, you guys have just fake news. So, I mean, what the heck?
That's right.
Everything's fake news.
We try not to be fake news here, although there are people who believe that anything that comes out is fake news. I want to talk about what I consider one of the most interesting and perhaps ridiculous stories that we've covered this week is this lawsuit where C.H. Robinson was sued. It's the U-turn lawsuit, the fatality, unfortunate incident with someone who should not have been on the road. This is a case where I think plaintiffs' attorneys are doing the work that the government didn't do. And actually, this is a case where I will make a case on behalf of your profession that there are times when the industry needs plaintiffs' attorneys because the government has not done their job. This is a specific case. However, the ridiculous part of this is that the plaintiff's attorneys sued C.H. Robinson, but C.H. Robinson was not involved in the load at all, did not broker the load, in fact, had not done business with this trucking company for something like 2 years before this transaction happened. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with you. I think it's ridiculous. It's outrageous. And when the lawsuit was filed, why wasn't it immediately brought to the attention of the plaintiff's attorney that, in fact, that Robinson wasn't involved, and it should have been dismissed early on? So I don't know procedurally why it continued on as long as it did. But maybe it was because it was on hold until the Montgomery case was going to be decided. I agree with you. There's no justification for it unless some document that the plaintiff's attorney got a hold of had the name of C.H. Robinson on it. I don't know, but it's disgraceful.
Do you think it was just
a lot of his lawyers? Go ahead.
Do you think it's because C.H. Robinson is so big? I think 1 out of 12 truckloads in the country has a C.H. Robinson broker. Do you think that obviously they have a giant target on their back simply because of the size and scale of it and the number of transactions? Do you think the plaintiff's attorneys just didn't do their homework and determine whether or not they just assumed maybe they thought they were getting lucky?
Well, I don't think that, because plaintiff's attorneys put their name on the line in front of the judge. And if that's the case, then they should be reprimanded. But maybe there was some other reason why. But it was, the articles make it clear that C.H. Robinson hadn't done business with this company for 2 years. And so all of that was there. And, as I said before, a defense attorney who was representing C.H. Robinson, well, I'm not so sure why the heck they didn't have this case dismissed the day it was filed.
Yeah, for sure. It is, like I said, it seems like a ridiculous. Again, I'm not an attorney, but talking to attorneys, it just feels that's a completely ridiculous
It is
thing, and
ridiculous.
it detracts from the more important work. You know, if we talk about holding bad actors accountable, which I think everyone who's operating legitimately, and you know, Dad, you ran a legitimate company. I know you have opinions on plaintiffs' attorneys having to deal on the other side of it because you guys are getting sued on occasion. But I think the government has not done their job to get rid of the riffraff. It feels like the attorneys are the folks that are actually creating law and order in this industry where the government hadn't.
Well, I think the real problem is we need tort reform. You know, used to, an attorney would go file suit, they would claim maybe the carrier did something wrong that created a problem, and that would be tested in court. Now what's happening is the courts are basically letting people to go shopping, and they shop for something that might have been wrong, and things that didn't have anything to do with the accident. You know, they're actually letting them pick, okay, maybe the guy had an accident 20 years ago, and they're calling it, well, you defective hiring. Well, that's not true. The guy's been safe for 20 years. But the courts let people go shopping, so it's really not the plaintiff's attorneys. They're just using the law the way it's set up. It's tort reform that's the real problem.
Ted, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, tort reform, it has a lot of meanings, but my sense is that a lawyer like myself who does plaintiff's work, we do it on a contingent basis. And you know what? I'm not going to waste my time on a case where I don't have clear evidence that a company was involved in a case. I mean, that's ridiculous. I mean, you'd be out of business as an attorney the next day. These insurance companies hire great lawyers who'll pin your ears back. So, you know, the thought that, oh, everybody can file a lawsuit and they can be frivolous and you can move ahead and do that, that's just not true. My God, even when I have a good close case, the insurance company is going back 25 years saying, aha, you had a slip and fall and you hurt your back then. So we're not responsible for your herniated disc today. So it's, you know, once you get into court, the truth comes out most of the time. And so I think the courts do a good job doing that. And I think the defense attorneys protect the companies to you know, a certain extent. I do feel as if the brokers now are going to be sued more often, and probably they're going to incur more expenses that maybe they shouldn't have to if there's no basis for the claim against the broker. So, you know, that's probably a negative thing that comes out of the Montgomery case is they'll have to settle a lot of cases that they wouldn't have been involved in the first place. But I don't think that tort reform is the case. And otherwise, the courts would just be for the rich and people that, you know, they call it the sport of the sport of kings. Who files lawsuits these days? The rich sue the rich, and the poor guy who was hurt by some company or whatever is unable to get justice. In some countries, they don't allow the contingent fee case. So, you know, keep in mind, again, I have to pay my mortgage. I have to pay, you know, my college expenses for my kids, those kinds of things. I'm not going to waste my time on a frivolous case because there's plenty of lawyers, defense lawyers out there who are going to kick your case right out. And if you don't have a good defense lawyer, well, then you better get a new one.
Yeah, and running a large carrier, we would actually have claims during the year where no one could prove a truck was involved, but we're in a lawsuit. And on an average year, we would settle almost $20 million worth of claims that we, you know, in most cases, we knew that we weren't involved in any form, but it's cheaper to pay the claim than it was to go to court, which I don't think is fair. And of course, the insurance companies don't think it's fair either. Sometimes you have to sue your own insurance company to get them to actually go fight some of these suits.
Yeah, Ted, any comment on that?
Well, I think that's, I mean, That's very unfortunate and very unfair. That's not right. And I don't know on the particular case why your attorneys weren't able to get what we call a motion for summary judgment, which is presenting to the judge, here's the basis that our truck wasn't involved. So
Yeah, I mean, having been in cases to get to summary judgment, I was in a case 7 years. I had three different, it was a high profile person in town. Three different attorneys recused themselves because judges recused themselves and actually had to get a judge from Nashville 7 years before we got a summary judgment. And the judge threw it all out. So this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I'm not going to, get into the arguments because I don't want to waste time on that. But it's still getting summary judgment can take time. You got to wait till, anyone's been in the court system. Yeah. A lot of people assume they watch on TV and it's like, hey, I'm going to sue you, and immediately the judge is going to rule on behalf. Good luck, brother. Like, you're in there for a long time. That's frankly how the whole legal system really exploits people and businesses and business leaders, is just the amount of cost and time that these lawsuits take. That's really, frankly, a weapon for plaintiffs' attorneys.
Well, if I'm not getting paid after 7 years on a case, and I've expended hundreds of thousands of dollars.
It was a contingent deal. It was the most insane thing. But
the thing about, if it took 7 years to get to summary judgment, you know who the winner of that case was? The defense lawyers. How much did they charge?
That was a six-figure.
Got nothing.
That was a six-figure. It was a plaintiff's deal. The plaintiff, I took it on contingency, did not win anything. We offered settlement, I think, 2 or 3 times. Did not do it, and finally it gets thrown out by the judge. But you guys, this is the most ridiculous lawsuit. Like, he literally was like, "This is insane." Why? One of the judges, I think, passed away in the middle of it, which caused its own set of headaches. Anyways, I want to talk about broker liability because Montgomery is the biggest story. You mentioned it. I don't think brokers are prepared for a new world. Talking to my dad, Max, about the work that U.S. Express had to do, oftentimes, these $15,000, $20,000 call it procedural filings in different districts just to get lawsuits dismissed, I think just eats you alive. Brokers are typically not having to contend with these issues because there's not a lot of upside in a plaintiff's attorney suing a broker. That's all changed in Montgomery. Ted, what are your thoughts?
Well, no question it's changed. But, there are, like, in the Ninth Circuit and the Sixth Circuit for years, the courts have allowed these cases to proceed. So there should be some history in terms of the brokers dealing with that. But I think that the fact that the brokers can make money, can make more money by hiring the least expensive carrier, that was a problem. That's just, the incentive is not there to put that freight onto an unsafe carrier. So the fact that they've never had to have insurance, and every trucking company, you have to have a minimum of $750,000, which doesn't cover all that much, but still, I think now they should have to have some kind of insurance. And I think what you said before about the federal government and the state government, they need to do something in terms of just set out some regulations. What is required of a broker so that they are not on the hook for these cases? Is it just searching safer system? Is it just getting a company to go through there? There needs to be some specific regulation which let these brokers know what they have to do so they can get off the hook. And so I think that it is now in the government's hand to do something like that. And I think in the decision, in the Supreme Court's decision, the majority said, look, or not, actually it was Judge Kavanaugh in the concurrence, he said, it may be time to go to the president and go to the Congress to see if you can get some specific regulations passed. And keep in mind, this was a 9-0 decision, which is unheard of with the polar opposites that you have on the court. But all 9 justices were in favor of holding a negligent broker, someone who just disregarded any careful vetting process. And the 9 justices, most of whom, the majority are appointed by Trump, did not think this was bad for business. They felt that because 5,000 people a year are killed by trucks and 150,000 people are seriously injured, that there needs to be some responsibility held by a broker who hires one of these chameleon companies who just shut down. And why on earth is the government allow a trucking company to go into business by paying $300 and getting a license?
Yeah, Ted, you and I will agree. Like, we may disagree on many things, but you and I agree that the government has not done its job. Congress, unfortunately, when you talk to the FMCSA, they're underfunded, they're under-resourced, and the charter that the FMCSA was originally set up really limits what they can do in terms of enforcement. And it's a real travesty, because what we have is an unregulated industry. We have a safety, a security, and frankly, an economic crisis caused by lower barriers to entry. The effort has been to lower the barriers to entry. And now an industry that has this crisis is only going to be dealt with, and unfortunately, good for your industry, not good for the industry, in nuclear lawsuits. That's where this is all going to end up.
Right. No,
Job
I
security.
agree.
Job security for you and your friends. So at least it's a growth industry there, Malcolm. This is a growth industry, being a plaintiff's attorney going after freight brokers.
It's never a boring day, is it?
It is always happening. So I've got to ask
you don't think AI is going to replace us?
No,
Not a chance. Not a
chance.
chance.
It's interesting. Not too long ago, I saw it was an employment thing, and the person was using AI to try to make an argument, to argue to become his own lawyer. Completely got stuff off. Like, you could tell that it looked like it was written by a lawyer, but when you read it, like, no attorney would. Probably what happened in this case, maybe they used ChatGPT and ended up as a plaintiff's attorney. I mean, because that's about as irresponsible as you could get, suing Sage Robinson in a load they weren't involved in. Very well could have been ChatGPT's idea.
I can see that.
That totally tracks.
It checks.
The unfortunate thing is the U.S. population is getting dumber and dumber.
Yes.
AI is not making us smarter, making humans smarter, and it's all part of the design, I think. I've got to ask about another case, Ted. Perrigo, case in California, nuclear lawsuit. What is your read on this particular case?
I think it's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. So here's a situation where every carrier who then subcontracted is held liable, even though they didn't do anything wrong. And I looked at the case, and the case refers to a 1952 case out of California, where it said that any trucking company that's a public utility cannot delegate its responsibility for safety. So this case has no precedential value in terms of federal regulations and cases in federal courts or state courts. And to hold strict liability just because the U.S. Post Office transferred it to one company who transferred it to another, it made no sense to me at all. The Montgomery case makes sense because they're talking about someone was careless in hiring, and the negligent hiring has been, for centuries, that's been a tort. But I was surprised by that decision, and maybe it's going up on appeal. I don't know. But it was interesting. They didn't sue the post office, even though it was their mail that was being transported.
Yeah, I mean, it was a $52 million nuclear lawsuit, as you talked about. It's triple brokered, not just double brokered, but triple brokered. And, the case, basically, the judgment was that everybody had liability in that line. And to your point, the Postal Service wasn't held accountable. Well, Ted, I hope you come back. We haven't been too hostile, so we would love to have you back, provide more insights. Look, the freight brokerage industry's got to figure this out.
Oh, ASAP.
When you come from an asset world and you think about liability and risk management every single day, and you're still vulnerable to just one mistake, it's what plaintiffs' attorneys make their money on. brokers have not thought about it that way.
Not at all.
They thought about the not having any liability. So we're going to get Ted to talk about that. Ted, appreciate you coming. We'll have you back soon, hopefully. Not so hostile.
No, it was great. You did awesome.
Yeah, I'm sure he's been in more hostile situations.
Surely.
All right, we'll be right back with you. We're going to talk more on the liability insurance thing here shortly.
Race car drivers like NASCAR champion Jesse Love are a lot like commercial drivers, pros. But even the best in the world still watch the tape to see what they missed and get better next time. So we created the Samsara Driving Coach.
Great race, Jesse, but you were following too closely and you were speeding.
Okay, you got me on that one.
Samsara uses insights from millions of professional drivers to coach drivers in real time.
Because even champions need a coach.
Give me the keys.
What's the masterclass all about? Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you're a driver, you're an owner-operator, you're a fleet owner, whether you're in compliance services, dispatcher, no matter what it is, masterclass is for you. Every 2 weeks, you're going to sit down with me and we're going to go over certain business topics that are related specifically to your small trucking company operations. We're going to help you with everything from compliance to how to negotiate better on the spot board, how to find direct freight, and everything in between. This is the reason why you don't want to miss out on Masterclass. It's about an hour to an hour and a half, and then on top of that, you'll have the library to you so that way you can always research and reflect back onto it. Don't miss out this opportunity. This is built specifically for you. I'm excited and I hope to see you in class.
Imagine a world where your freight moves as fast as a digital pulse. What if your visibility didn't just tell you where a truck was, but exactly where it needed to be 48 hours from now? Think of a logistics network that corrects its own mistakes before they cost you a single dime. What if your supply chain could think for itself? Imagine AI agents negotiating rates in milliseconds, predictive models that solve labor shortages before they even happen. This isn't science fiction, it's the agenda. On July 15th at the historic Old Post Office in Chicago, FreightWaves presents the Supply Chain AI Symposium. We are defining in real time how AI is embedded into every mile, every warehouse, and every handshake. Because in 2026, the future isn't just coming, it's already negotiating. The FreightWaves Supply Chain AI Symposium. Secure your spot now.
You know, I'm sure Ted is a very effective attorney.
Absolutely.
And he's used to being in a courtroom, but you know what? I am judge here at FreightWaves today.
Yes, sir.
And our audience is our jury. We'd love to hear from you. Your thoughts on plaintiffs' attorneys and what Ted said. Do you think they provide an important good? Malcolm, what are your thoughts?
Listen, I plead the fifth.
Oh, you're staying out of this. You don't want to be. I know how Max feels about it, but yeah, it's an interesting conversation. Hit us up on social media about your thoughts about plaintiffs' attorneys. Are they really doing God's work, or are they doing Satan's?
It's case by case basis, but I think it's more so Satan's than God.
You think that they're
I'll leave it
the devil? Well, this is a brutal thing. I hope Ted comes back. He seems like a nice guy. I don't know that I want to be on the other side of Ted.
No way.
He didn't seem to like some of the rebuttals about some of the stuff. He definitely came prepared.
He's very media trained.
Very media trained. Very good. All right. Well, next up, we've got Sonar. We'll talk about the freight market and really what we're seeing. Is expected to be a scorcher, and I'm not talking about the freight market right now. I'm talking specifically about the weather. In fact, some of the heat advisory across the country, particularly the eastern part of the United States, going all the way down to the Gulf Coast in southern Alabama, Mississippi, all the way up into Canada. Heat advisory is at extreme levels, is exactly what we are seeing right now inside of Sonar's weather optics integration. Extreme heat is how they have described it. 114 degree weather What does that mean for freight? It means that refrigerated and temperature control freight is at a premium. This is a time when companies, even when they don't typically ship reefer with those level of heat, they're going to be very concerned about keeping products. Certain products can move most of the time by dry van, but there are certain times when you have this level of heat to maintain the product integrity, it needs to move by refrigerated or temperature controlled. And that's what we will see over the next couple of days, particularly with the long holiday weekend coming up, is they don't want the stuff sitting in a hot trailer. And so they will look for potentially refrigerated. You see this when we have extreme heat or extreme cold. There's a protect from freeze and protect from heat. This is really the protect from heat section of that story. You can get this data inside of Sonar. You can see the map that we've got here. This pink area is the extreme heat area. And if you basically pull up, it will tell you what exactly is going on. Just click on that individual map location and it will tell you what is actually happening there. And you can see that pink just is all of the heat that we're going to be experiencing. When you look across the United States, it's really the entire eastern United States. It's going to be a scorcher. But let's move into the freight data because I think it will tell us a lot about what we're actually seeing. When we look at spot rates in refrigerated, we are up to near all-time highs. We got there a little bit right after Memorial Day in early June. Paused a little bit over the last couple of weeks. It's now ramping again. I would expect this weekend we will see it hit an all-time record again, simply because of the weather, in addition to it being July 4th holiday, and freight that is being stacked, as David Spencer, the head of analytics over at Arrived Logistics, told us yesterday on FreightWaves Today, is that shippers are stacking freight for next week simply because they are not shipping that stuff out. There isn't demand for it. They're moving it into next week, so next week could actually be a bigger week than this week, according to what David is telling us. When we move into rejection rates, I like to look at the Sonar tender rejection rates for reefer because it does have a lot more reefer, it has a lot more CPG in it than just the general outbound tender rejection refrigerated rate, ROTRI. This is STRIR, and it's at 22.06. ROTRI, which is the refrigerated, the traditional outbound tender rejection index for refrigerated, is actually a little higher, around 27%. But the reason I'm not looking at it is it doesn't have as much refrigerated in it. This index is very, very heavy refrigerated, and therefore it is a better reflection of sort of the market conditions, in my opinion. It is 22% rejections. We're near all-time highs. Expect that to go up this week. And it's something we will expect to see. I'm going to move into looking at spot market conditions. It's another map, and I've talked about the Hall map over the last couple of weeks. I'm taking you into a different map. Again, we have a ton of maps inside of Sonar. You can visualize a lot of things. But what this map is actually showing is markets across the country where spot rates, and I'm looking specifically at refrigerated, spot rates are increasing. And it's the percentage of lanes out of those markets where you see spot market increase. If the bluer it is, the deeper blue, the more percentage of lanes that are seeing increasing refrigerated spot rates. And you can see most of the country is painted in blue. And some parts of the country are over 100 or at 100%, can't be over 100%, are at 100% of the lanes are showing increasing spot rates. And it's just something to watch because as we head into the weekend, you got the combination of heat combined with the holiday weekend. It could be really interesting in the refrigerated market. One more thing, heat brings out a lot of freight demand in the beverage sector. I know this from running freight. When I was running the boards, we would see a lot of bottled water, a lot of soda, a lot of sports drinks, a lot of beer. And again, July 4th distorts it because that's naturally a big time of year for consumption of liquids, particularly alcohol. This time of year, the scorching heat is going to drive more of it because there is a direct correlation between heat and the amount of consumption of beverages that people consume. water being one of those. In fact, when you're running freight, and most of the time, water doesn't pay very much. It's not a great commodity to move, but when you get to these extreme levels of heat, you make a lot of money. There's some big rips out there in the water segment and the beverage segment because of what we're seeing.
Craig, that sonar market update was, pun intended, hot from you.
It was hot. It was hot. It is very hot.
What was the most important point you think that our viewers and listeners can take away from it?
Look, when I ran the on-demand business of U.S. Express, which was basically we would haul as much freight as you would call within 6 hours of 60 major U.S. markets. And we would get hundreds of truckloads, not like 10, hundreds of
substantial volume.
And we were very early in sort of the on-demand business before brokers really took that market.
Right.
Now that's really the lifeblood of a lot of freight brokers is last minute. You know, RXO's got that whole capacity now element of sort of providing last minute. When your routing guide breaks, is who you call is RXO. It's the same concept here. Water, believe it or not, I got nicknamed at US Express the Water Boy, which I think was meant as a condescending term. But they called me the Water Boy because we shipped a lot of water, and we would get Nestle Waters and Niagara at, it would be 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock on a Thursday and a Friday, and it was all directly correlated to the temperature.
Yeah.
And they may be only going 100 miles because they don't ship, typically water is not shipped over thousands of miles. It's shipped pretty locally.
For sure.
But the temperature was directly correlated. So you had a hot weekend in Texas or Tennessee, you would see an enormous
spike.
Surge in bottled water, and I think that's why a lot of brokers haul it. They don't make a lot of money on the day-to-day shipments. They make their money on those last-minute shipments where companies are willing to pay hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars even. Because you think about it, how much they sell for bottled water, it costs like 3 cents to fill that thing up.
Easily.
Most of it's in marketing, but if they miss, one thing about consumers, when they go into the store, you go to the gas station, you're like, I want bottled water. You have your preferred, by the way, it's bottle shape. Crazy story, but it's the bottle shape that you prefer and bottle type. And if you don't see it, you're gonna pick up a different case of water, different type of water. Anyways, we'll be right back. We're gonna talk insurance.
It's National Safety Month, which makes this a great time to ask how your fleet can prevent more accidents. Samsara AI detects risks in real time, giving teams more visibility into what's happening on the road and more context to coach drivers before risky moments become incidents. Fleets using Samsara Complete AI Safety Solution have reduced crash rates by nearly 75%. See the data behind the results in the Samsara Safety Report at samsara.com/freightwaves.
Race car drivers like NASCAR champion Jesse Love are a lot like commercial drivers, pros. But even the best in the world still watch the tape to see what they missed and get better next time. So we created the Samsara Driving Coach.
Great race, Jesse, but you were following too closely and you were speeding.
Okay, you got me on that one.
Samsara uses insights from millions of professional drivers to coach drivers in real time.
Because even champions need a coach.
Give me the keys.
The super successful people are part of the 1%. They're part of that very, very small percentage. That's why I don't want you to do things that everybody's doing. I want you to do the small things that nobody else is doing. The people that are most successful in this business treat it like it's the only thing that's bringing income into their household. If you do that, then you'll have the same results. These people operate like they have no other chance. They have nothing else going. This is the only breadwinner that they have in play. I'm Adam Wingfield, and this is the FreightWaves Playbook. Become part of the 1%. Sign up for FreightWaves Playbook today.
So we opened the show talking to the plaintiffs' attorneys. Let's talk to the guys that actually have to deal with people like Ted. We next up have Nyles Oppenheimer. He's the Chief Revenue Officer at CoverWell. CoverWell is a commercial trucking insurance technology platform that just launched Breakwater Markets. It's a wholesale brokerage to really help deal with those issues that traditional insurance doesn't know how to underwrite. So we're gonna talk to Nyles. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Well, I'd love to get your take on everything that's happening. Liability is obviously a very important topic with all the different cases, the nuclear lawsuits, what we saw with SCOTUS just a few weeks ago. Where are we at, and what are you guys hoping to accomplish?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me, and thanks for the question. I think to start, it would be helpful for us to maybe frame the environment. And I promise you, for your audience out there, I'm not a plant by FreightWaves simply to promote the benefits of FreightWaves and all your services. But Rob Carpenter, one of your writers, put out a really interesting opinion piece last week that I think does a really effective job at framing kind of where we are from an insurance standpoint. And the general headline was that it's not a litigation or a loss problem, but instead it's a problem driven by legislation or lack thereof, or the enforcement of it, and underwriting discipline by insurance carriers. So effectively what we're seeing is an environment where there's a host of self-inflicted wounds that the market's trying to correct for, and then layer on top of that some of the things that you had just mentioned creates a ton of uncertainty in the market. And as you can appreciate, in the insurance market, uncertainty is a challenging thing. And so what that means is not only are they trying to price, or the approach is meant to try to correct for those self-inflicted wounds, but they're also pricing in that uncertainty that is really revolving around the legislative environment that we're currently in at the moment.
So Nyles, SCOTUS has probably been the biggest disruption. Truck asset liability has been around for, as long as trucks have been around. They've always been, as Ted likes to say, a tort. There's always been torts when you have that. Negligent hiring as it relates to brokers, were effectively federal preemption exempted a lot of districts from this getting to court. But the Supreme Court completely unraveled all of that. As you guys sort of go to market, how are you helping companies navigate this change environment?
So those self-inflicted wounds that I've described, and that uncertainty, that's we're purpose built to effectively address that. So some of the things that were mentioned in that article around like self-certification and a true lack of understanding of the individual risk. We are a technology forward, as you mentioned, entity, and the way in which we're technology forward is both through the distribution of our product, but the thing that's probably more important to your audience is the way in which we actually assess risk. Because long has been the belief that the transportation space is a risky space, and I think a lot of the rulings and legislation haven't really helped with that perspective. Our position and our approach is that sure, risk exists, which is the general nature of why insurance is a necessary part of the value chain. But each individual carries an independent risk, and through our technology and the leveraging of data and machine learning, we're able to price those risks independently and give folks in the transportation space better outcomes, as well as enable them to manage their exposure on the go forward.
Now, are you guys working with insurance brokers, carriers directly, or are you actually available for companies that are seeking out insurance and trying to mitigate their risk? How do you guys interact?
Yeah, so we don't do anything direct today. So we are our distribution, and the way in which we access the market is through retail and wholesale insurance agencies across the country. And you had mentioned Breakwater. So that's actually a wholesale agency that we've stood up ourselves. And the intent behind that is like we've had 6 years of practice validating that the technology model that I just described works. But we are only one small cog in the wheel, and we are only gaining access to a very small percentage of the market, given our program and our capabilities and our appetite. The implementation and the execution of breakwater actually allows us to proliferate the access to the things that I just described that help manage and assess risk on a more effective basis. So effectively allows us to bring the technology component of what we're doing to a broader swath of the segment.
So, Nyles, I got to ask a quick question because this is a topic that everyone in a post-Montgomery world, there was a lot of, call it noise, maybe a little bit of signal right after the Montgomery judgment that broker insurance cost premiums were going to go up anywhere from we had some estimates as high as 10x. Any data to support that, or is that just a lot of panic without certainty?
Well, I think it's panic, but it's well-founded panic. So I can't sit here today and tell you exactly what the impact is going to be from a cost perspective. But one thing that is undeniable is it will impact cost, most likely to the negative for everybody who's paying attention on the in your audience, both from an operating perspective as well as from an insurance cost perspective. It's just the impact of that, to me, still kind of remains to be seen, but it will undoubtedly increase costs for everybody in the value chain.
Now, I have a question for you, Nyles. With this Modus rollout, right, how has this impacted everything in your world? Because I'm sure there's been quite a bit of disruption. I'm sure of it that there's a lot of disruption, but what can you tell us?
I mean, for us specifically, I think we are best positioned. I mean, the world in which we're living in post Modus is exactly what CoverWell was stood up to handle, which is to manage and assess risk. So for a trucking carrier to be able to manage a risk and be able to identify yourself as a self well-run entity, and from a freight broker's perspective, having a CoverWell policy is an indication that not only is that individual safe, but has the necessary protocols and processes in place to ensure that they continue to be safe in a legitimate operation. So for us, it's actually been a bit of I don't want to say a blessing, right? Because I know that there are impacts and potentially negative impacts to those in the industry, but it puts us in a really interesting competitive advantage for the rest of the industry. I think it's, again, it kind of remains to be seen, and it's a very challenged environment, mainly because insurance as a whole it tends to be an archaic and slow moving industry, and so things like this, the impact generally takes a long time to materialize, but generally speaking, when this uncertainty exists, it doesn't generally bode well for those that are buyers of that product.
Now, Nyles, talk to me a little bit about how underwriting discipline looks right now in this current environment that we're in.
So underwriting discipline is in motion. And so, going back to that article that I had mentioned at the outset of this interview, righting the wrongs of some self-inflicted wounds, we have insurance entities that are far less tech forward than us now trying to impose some greater discipline, and that discipline now is being potentially jeopardized by the rollout of things like Modus, which is the new registration software that the FMCSA is using that, for all intents and purposes, doesn't work. And so you now have an industry that is reliant on data from a system that is not collecting and distributing and making available said data. So just adding additional uncertainty to the different carriers and insurance carriers and their approach to kind of assessing that risk. But generally speaking, because of that self-inflicted wounds of the past, you're seeing a greater level of discipline, or an attempted greater level of discipline across the board. And the way in which that's materializing is either you're seeing insurance carriers pull out of specific geographies or specific segments of business, or in some cases, they're pulling out of transportation entirely. And what that means for the ultimate end user, for the buyer, is there's just less choice going to be available in the market, and those that exist are going to be far more disciplined. And what I mean by disciplined is they're going to be looking to take significantly more rate.
Well, Nyles, I was talking to one of the largest freight brokers in the country last week. They mentioned the fact that with modus being down, or not dysfunctional, we'll call it, because I think the FMCSA gets a little defensive when you say it's down.
They sure do.
But the idea that it doesn't work the way it was intended, or perhaps doesn't work the way it used to work, or at least the FMCSA system doesn't work the way it used to work. The idea is that these brokers don't actually know whether the carriers they're tendering, because these files are broken and corrupted, don't even know if the carrier has legitimate operating authority. How are insurance companies, or how are you guys helping companies navigate that issue?
Well, us specifically, because we're a tech-forward entity and our purpose-built approach, like, we're not solely dependent on the availability of FMCSA data to make assessments as to whether or not a particular entity is who they say they are and they operate the way in which they claim to. The broader industry, I don't think, has that same ability. And so that's what goes back. I go back to my comment I made previously. We're seeing insurance carriers outright pull out of the transportation space. And if they remain in the transportation space, they are pulling out of specific geographies or specific classes of business. And so the amount of choice and the quality of that choice is going to be limited. But those that are tech forward like ourselves are uniquely positioned, I think, to survive and thrive in an environment like this.
Now, where are they pulling out? Where are you seeing insurance companies? You talk about regional, you're talking about certain types of freight. Where's
California, Illinois, Ohio, as well as certain types of freight, scaling back in intermodal and things like box trucks. Like, we're seeing a pretty significant impact from the competitive landscape. It looks materially different today than it did, I'd say, even 12 months ago, in terms of who we look at as our competitors and who we're seeing win in the space.
Now, is that just because the box trucks have a lot of unregulated entities, is where a lot of the non-domiciled CDL drivers have sort of showed up into that market because there isn't the level of regulation and issues that you see in the over-the-road market?
That's correct.
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy time. I mean, we've been covering this business for now almost 10 years. We're at 10 years, by the way. July of 2016 is FreightWaves' birthday.
I had no idea.
Now, we were not publishing content to 2017, but we're a 10-year-old company.
A decade in the game.
We need a birthday cake.
Need a birthday cake.
I need a birthday cake.
Let's do that.
We need a theme. We should come up with a theme. I'd love to hear what people think should be on the cake. Because I am a sucker now. I've got kids. I've got 5 kids, and I've got young kids, and that's when they're fun. They get older, they're less fun. But getting something really cool for the birthday cake, that's what we need. We need to know. You should tell us on X what our birthday cake theme should be.
I love it.
We'll do a whole show on our birthday. We had to have like prizes.
Oh no, there needs to be giveaways.
Goodie bags.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll do that.
Just a lot going on. I'm curious, is all the action around insurance, is this stuff that's happening in trucking, or are you seeing a broader level of movement in other industries as well? Do you guys even get outside the trucking industry?
No, I think it's pretty much isolated to the transportation space. The majority of the market is what we would call a soft market, whereas the transportation space, commercial auto, that hard market has persisted, and I think it's due to some of the corrections that we're seeing as a result of the self-inflicted wounds, but more importantly, I think all the uncertainty that exists in our space.
Are you guys in aviation as well, or is it predominantly trucking and commercial trucking?
Predominantly trucking. We're on the road.
God, I am curious because, the government has, up until this administration, left this industry so deregulated. And it was an effort to deregulate it. The states were doing the same. We're now paying the price.
Yes.
Consumers are paying the price with higher rates. And look, I am all champion for higher rates that reward truckers for the hard work they do and higher pay. But it is a backlash, and I don't see it getting any easier. Now, do you see anything on the horizon that's going to suggest that this industry is going to go through, that insurance companies are going to be investing in, or are we going to see tighter insurance markets going forward?
I think it's going to be tighter and tighter for the foreseeable future, unfortunately, for those that are involved in it.
I know that you guys are working with the insurance carriers, but I'm sure you talk to a lot of the brokers about their perspective on really what they're hearing from their customers. Is there any bit of advice that our listeners should know about how to help them manage risk most appropriately?
To me, it starts with transparency and an ability to actually to manage that risk. And so you need to find partners, both from the insurance side, insurance carriers like ourselves, or other services out there that can give you that level of transparency, both to kind of manage your exposure with others as well as your own. Because I think that's what that SCOTUS ruling, really the end result of that SCOTUS ruling is everybody's going to be held to a higher standard. And the question is, like, how do you elevate your game? And to me, it's through the partners that you choose to work with.
Well, Nyles, appreciate you coming on. We hope to have you back. This conversation around insurance and risk is going to always be there. It's getting harder and harder to underwrite. Stay with us. We'll be right back. We're going to talk about the economy coming up.
In freight, again, your customer experience is everything. Every quote, order, and status update is a chance to win or lose a customer, but that will still, again, run on manual, disconnected systems. Pallet is the leading enterprise AI built for the supply chain, automating costly operations from code to cash across brokerages, carriers, forwarders, shippers, and warehouses. Mallory Alexander serves 3 times more customers per operator, deliver an exceptional customer experience at scale. Visit them right now at pallet.com. Getting reliable capacity can be complicated. Let RXO make it simple. As the 3rd largest provider of brokered transportation in North America, RXO has the scale, resources, and expertise to help you tackle any shipping challenge. From a last-minute spot load to a managed transportation solution, from LTL to intermodal, from trained logistics experts to AI-powered freight automations, RXO has you covered from the first mile to the last mile. Start shipping on easy mode with RXO and get a smart solution to move your freight. Learn more at rxo.com/capacity.
Race car drivers like NASCAR champion Jesse Love are a lot like commercial drivers, pros. But even the best in the world still watch the tape to see what they missed and get better next time. So we created the Samsara driving coach.
Great race, Jesse, but you were following too closely and you were speeding.
Okay, you got me on that one.
Samsara uses insights from millions of professional drivers to coach drivers in real time.
Because even champions need a coach.
Give me the keys.
What's the masterclass all about? Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you're a driver, you're an owner-operator, you're a fleet owner, whether you're in compliance services, dispatcher, no matter what it is, masterclass is for you. Every 2 weeks, you're going to sit down with me and we're going to go over certain business topics that are related specifically to your small trucking company operations. We're going to help you with everything from compliance to how to negotiate better on the spot board, how to find direct freight, and everything in between. This is the reason why you don't want to miss out on Masterclass. It's about an hour to an hour and a half, and then on top of that, you'll have the library to you so that way you can always research and reflect back onto it. Don't miss out this opportunity. This is built specifically for you. I'm excited, and I hope to see you in class.
Imagine a world where your freight moves as fast as a digital pulse. What if your visibility didn't just tell you where a truck was, but exactly where it needed to be 48 hours from now? Think of a logistics network that corrects its own mistakes before they cost you a single dime. What if your supply chain could think for itself? Imagine AI agents negotiating rates in milliseconds, predictive models that solve labor shortages before they even happen. This isn't science fiction, it's the agenda. On July 15th at the historic Old Post Office in Chicago, FreightWaves presents the Supply Chain AI Symposium. We are defining in real time how AI is embedded into every mile, every warehouse, and every handshake. Because in 2026, the future isn't just coming, it's already negotiating. The FreightWaves Supply Chain AI Symposium. Secure your spot now.
Well, we're moving beyond risk management and reliability into the world of the economy, my favorite topic. And with us to break it down is Matt Munster. He is the chief economist at Breakthrough. Matt, man, you have got to be one of the busiest people that I know, I imagine, because the world went absolutely crazy. Fuel prices, oil prices went absolutely hyperbolic. Unprecedented, really, in modern days in the last 40 years, level of disruption on Hormuz. What are you guys seeing?
Yeah, you're being very kind, Craig. I think there are a lot of busy people out there in the world, yourselves included. Thank you so much for having me on. In terms of the broader economy, the impact of the Strait of Hormuz, there are a number of different developments that continue to raise a lot of questions and create the hustle that you've talked about. We went up a side of the mountain in terms of much higher prices back in March at the onset of broader conflict and war in the Middle East. We've come down the other side of the mountain and hopefully will stay that way into a lower price environment through much of May and June in particular. We shed over $20 per barrel from West Texas intermediate prices just in the month of June. So we've had a tremendous amount of volatility in the market. It's contingent. It is kind of ongoing. It's geopolitical in nature, so it's day to day and is creating for a very volatile and difficult to manage transportation experience in 2026. And that's just talking energy before we go into so many other dynamics that are out there in the market.
Now, Matt, we've talked about the fact, and you guys know this because you see the data, is that when fuel prices go up, the truck stops immediately, particularly retail. They love taking that up like a rocket ship. But when fuel prices go down, it's a soft feather. Why is that? What is the real reason other than this is how they make money?
Yeah, several operational reasons. To go back to kind of a go-to economic phrase, if you will, up like a rocket, down like a feather. We're used to talking about fuel prices and dynamics to retail stations in this regard. Some of this experience is driven by the inventory that's held at the respective station themselves, where they purchased it, and how they progress from that inventory in terms of ensuring that they're meeting their costs. Part of it is looking around to see what your competitors are doing in terms of their price point. And ultimately, that incentivizes not only this very quick movement to higher prices that we're accustomed to seeing, but also this slow, soft like a feather movement on the way down from that elevated retail price environment, which has been a pain point for not just commercial trucking industry, but also consumers at large. Just whether we're talking diesel or gasoline, we're having a little bit of a similar experience, although diesel has some unique stickiness to it also.
Yeah, I mean, we've advised every time we talk about fuel on the show is that everybody should be buying their fuel at wholesale. It's something you guys help shippers do. Talk a little bit about that process, how that works, and really how shippers benefit from it.
Yeah, so we work real closely with shippers fleets. They operate a private fleet, and they benefit from it in a couple of different ways. So first, at Breakthrough, our core solutions focus upon helping shippers make better decisions. To make good decisions, you need data and information to do that. And so we focused upon, and we're disruptive to the market. Over 20 years ago, we brought a different opportunity to manage fuel into the marketplace that focused along individual lanes, specific equipment, the unique tax profiles of moving state to state versus kind of one size fits national surcharge. As the business has grown, we manage across modes of freight transportation. Our aim is to manage across any energy types because they can, of course, be different than conventional diesel, as well as internationally, where structures can be very dissimilar from what we're accustomed to here in North America. And so really the advantage it brings, especially in volatile times like these, is you have the data and information to act upon in near real time how the market is evolving and make decisions accordingly. So when you have that data and information, you can understand how your fuel costs will vary from the West Coast to the East Coast, north to south, even state to state, or lane to lane, and ultimately decide how you're going to strategically approach that when market volatility hits.
Now, Matt, we know about ocean rates, of course, skyrocketing since the conflict began in February. But to no surprise, air also did a lot in terms of inflation. Can you speak to that a little bit, why that happened, and what you're currently seeing as well?
Sure. Air freight rates go a little bit over my head. I don't spend, small pun intended, I don't spend a lot of time on the aviation industry, although something that's interconnected across all freight is their dependency on low sulfur fuel. And we know that, and we've experienced perhaps in the purchase of our personal flights, that airfares have gone up dramatically, and it's no surprise that fuel has had a heavy hand in that. And so when we think about what's driving some of these rates, it is the fact that when we think about the aviation industry, they're very reliant on a low sulfur distillate fuel, just like international maritime shipping, as you just brought up, just like over the road trucking and rail movements. We're all dependent on the same slice of that refined barrel, of that crude barrel, and ultimately the refined products that are middle distillates. When there's pressure upon that portion of refined products, it spreads throughout the freight ecosystem because of it. It's been a driver of those higher freight rates in the aviation industry.
Now, Matt, yesterday we covered ocean spot rates. Malcolm mentioned it. Absolutely gone. Hyperbolic, maybe an exaggeration, but a 3x increase really since this conflict began. How much of the increase in ocean container freight is directly correlated to the ultra low sulfur fuel that you talk about?
There's definitely an impact to rates that's coming from fuel. Oftentimes in managing that, it's separated. So bunker adjustment factors are pretty common practice, at least with contracted rate for maritime. You did bring up spot rates. Fuel has, at its peak, see it increase on a container basis, more than doubled across most trade lanes. Now, the distance of those trade lanes, the ports in scope, we saw much more pronounced fuel price volatility and pressure in Asia, closer to Middle Eastern disruption and ultimately where those fuels were distributed than we did here in North America, for example. But you could easily say that fuel costs per container doubled during the peak of this disruption over the last couple of months. So I'd expect that would have played into the spot rates also. But there is a lot more pressure there now that we've hit peak shipping season to what you're seeing also play out in those freight rates.
Yeah, when yesterday we were talking about the China to the United States spot price for containers was up to $6,200 a TEU, which prior to the conflict was at $1,800. Yeah. Of course, I covered this yesterday. Is the fact that the ocean container lines have such a massive amount of pricing power. Let's pull this up. I mean, you can see it right there. Is just it's interesting because it looks like you compare to where we were in COVID, that absolutely insane surge in spot rates. But, we have come off the bottom. And the volumes are good, but they're not, they're actually lower than they were last year. This looks to me like the ocean container lines are just using their market power to really, really exploit the opportunities.
Well, I can comment on a couple developmental along those lines. So one interesting dynamic, like so many markets, crude oil falls into this realm of conversation also. We came into 2026 expecting there to be perhaps overcapacity. Entering the year, we thought there'd be a return to more shipping volumes to the Red Sea and ultimately through the Strait of Hormuz that could perhaps move capacity that was transiting around the Cape of Good Hope, ultimately decrease the voyage time substantially and help grow the capacity in the market. That has flipped. To your point, it looks very modest when we start to compare it to the experience through COVID. But ultimately, the pressure has ramped up. And I think peak season is being elevated. It's an opportunity for carriers to put pressure onto rates and to go out in the spot market and be aggressive. We are seeing that play out.
So, Matt, what is your take on the global economy? Is this we have a strong economy? Is it weakening? You know, the employment data this morning was a little weaker than expectations. What is your read on where we're at in terms of the economy?
So as of late, and honestly, in 2026, really seen an imbalanced performance across our economy. And in Breakthrough's ecosystem of freight data, we kind of see that play out. We think about industry to industry comparisons, for example. We've seen a lot of freight moving when it comes to packaging and really paper and packaging, as well as aluminum and other commodities that are used for that respective industry. However, it changes dramatically. When we think about durable goods, we see a lot of freight moving for construction, for commercial purposes, and into AI and data centers. We see a very different take in the housing market, where appliance sales and other home goods are really lagging. And so this is an imbalanced experience that we continue to experience. I'd say it checks out when we look at total tonnage, that it's not demand driving our freight market right now. At least most of it can make the argument it's driving the flatbed portion of our freight market. But it still lags in many sectors and isn't a full-blown kind of solid economic performance across the board for goods. Internationally, I think there's a much more pronounced impact of the oil shock than what we're feeling here in North America, closer to home. That when international energy prices, the price of crude oil increases substantially, has a much more pronounced impact on demand destruction abroad than it does here. We look at weekly EIA inventory reports. That helps provide some perspective. We've seen a pretty steady couple % decrease in gasoline products supplied on a year-over-year basis. Nothing overly pronounced, but we can see with some clear lines that upward energy prices have had an impact on the consumer. Internationally, that's just much more pronounced. And so I think that offers more headwinds to international economies. Here in the United States, I think it's more of an uneven experience across industries, although collectively, the overall impression we gather from equities markets just had our best quarter in years, that generally, while there's an imbalanced experience, we're moving along just fine.
Yeah, Matt, it's interesting. The industrial sector, if you look at the rail volumes, we're going to hear about this here shortly because the American Association of Railroads puts out their weekly report. Stay tuned for that. We'll have Train's Bill Stevens to give us the lowdown on what we're seeing in rail. But the interesting thing is the railroads came in with low expectations for this year, but things have continued to firm up in particularly some of those really heavy industry elements inside the economy. Is this just, economists love to talk about the K-shaped economy, but it almost feels like it's a very sector specific where there's a lot of winners and there are just as many losers or perhaps some losers, particularly housing you mentioned is a loser right now. But things like steel, American steel production is absolutely ripping. And I know you and I have talked about the Canadian economy, which is really commodity driven, is not doing as well as the U.S. economy. And what's strange about that is just the commodities that drive the Canadian economy, they're not seeing the same level of sort of excitement that we see here in the U.S.
Yeah, I agree with that take. I think we can talk about it in K-shape form in terms of understanding how the economy is performing across different household incomes. I like your take of explaining it in really industry format and kind of what I was just getting to. We see this varied experience industry to industry. It's the implications that tariffs have had over time and what remains in place for respective industries. It is the implication of higher energy prices and how consumers are perhaps trading down in some of their purchases that can be impactful. It's the broader policy environment, no doubt about it. But we also see some industries returning to growth in the U.S. that are supported by this very same policy environment. So we have these diverse experiences really on an industry to industry basis. When it comes to rail, I was just going to add on rail, I do think that's another solid way to kind of test that hypothesis. Is I think as of late, they've seen more volumes in grain shipments. However, to your point, there are other commodities that haven't fared as well when it comes to the rail moves. I would say across the breakthrough ecosystem, shippers are very motivated to return more volume to the rail, especially the intermodal markets, given where freight rates have gone, and just need the reassurance that service will continue to be there. We'll continue to see that as an area of growth when we think about volumes also, that there's that transition from truckload to rail based on some savings.
Yeah, it takes we've talked about it here on the show. It does take shippers, there's folks on X that sort of argued, well, they'll just move freight immediately. That isn't how it works. Like, even if you want to use intermodal, you got to be in a position. It takes time to reshift your supply chain. But the spot market and contract market rate in trucking has gotten much more inflated that I think shippers realize. And I think the fuel shock that we saw in March was sort of the catalyst for a lot of shippers saying, look, I need to look at intermodal. I get better fuel surcharge, but there's this capacity situation that doesn't exist in the intermodal crack issues that you see in the over-the-road market. That seems to be driving some of it. Like I said, we're going to hear about what the state of rail freight is, but I think last week was up 9% year over year. So Matt, I've got to ask: is this Taylor Swift wedding going to have the same economic impact as the concerts that she did, where the Fed is picking this up in their book?
I can only imagine the economic impact it will have. It'll be fascinating to see results. I think it's got to be up there with, maybe something along the lines of the Scottish footballers' invasion of Boston in the last couple of weeks, and ultimately what it did to the broader community. Probably some different products involved. But between the World Cup, Taylor Swift wedding, you name it, you've got some headline events that can really move freight and goods into markets.
I bet she's got great cake. Like, you think about it, like that's my wife drags me to these weddings. I probably did since I met her, probably 40 weddings. I've been to more weddings since we've met in the last, for the last 10 years than I've been in my entire life combined.
100%.
And the only thing, the food is what I look forward to. I don't look forward to the small talk. I find that to be a lot, but the food is what I go, and the cake.
I think the music is going to be outstanding because of Travis Kelce.
Yes.
I just think he's got a lot of soul.
You think Travis Kelce
I think Travis is he's a guy, you gotta have.
Look, I think she's got Lorena Del Rey and Tim McGraw.
There's a lot. That is a star-studded wedding.
Yeah, but we don't know who's going to be there. I mean, there's stuff leaking. Yeah. They're building a castle. That's worth something in the economy. It's nuts. It's the old broken window adage. If you add demand, you're going to break it down. Yeah. I can imagine how much that wedding's going to be. Matt, we gotta have somebody talk about these big events like
the logistics behind Taylor Swift's wedding.
Oh my gosh! Yeah. I did. Years ago, it became one of my biggest tweets. I tweeted the conversation around the Taylor Swift concert and just how many truckloads were involved. It was absolutely epic.
That's really cool.
She did make. It was interesting when the Fed they do this beige book thing where they do interviews and they talk about the economic impact. It was. Matt, you may remember, it was a couple percent of GDP Taylor Swift alone was driving. And this was at a time when the economy wasn't doing so hot. So she certainly was turning it up.
Yeah,
He's going to stay away.
It's pretty
from this.
remarkable.
You don't want to offend the student.
Yeah, I probably should, but it is remarkable her impact. Yeah. So I'll wait for that next report.
Well, we'll see. Maybe New York, Manhattan economy this weekend. I've got to ask. I mean, you mentioned the World Cup. America is at its finest, we'll say, on stage globally. There's been a lot here. Well, we'll see how we do in soccer.
Yeah.
Look, if we can't root for the Americans, I'm rooting for the Spanish team. That's a hometown thing. The Spanish team is staying just next door,
down the street,
a week over, a street over, and so we're definitely Team Spain down here in America, unless they're playing the United States. But I've got to ask, Matt, there's been this conversation around energy. Europe is getting a lot of heat.
Pun intended.
For no air condition and decommissioning their energy over there. It's causing a lot of problems, both in terms of just quality of life, but also economic. America, while we have our problems, we have our NIMBYism, we didn't build power, we have benefited from the shale revolution and plentiful supply of natural gas. I have contended and argued that a lot of the industrial demand we're seeing, or a portion of it, is actually because of the readily available energy. And this is going to help the manufacturing sector as we go forward because energy is so important to it. What is your read on it?
Certainly to have energy supplies and a resilient energy infrastructure is a tremendous advantage when it comes to economic activity, and has to be a motivating factor in pulling companies back to the U.S. I think we saw the opposite of that. Europe being heavily dependent upon Russian supplies has taken really years to logistically reshuffle and realign its energy supply chain. That's had a really profound impact on those economies. U.S. oil production just hit an all-time high with, I think the most recently reported data was April, nearly 14 million barrels per day. LNG production is growing rapidly. I think to your point, we've got some questions around our own grid and our ability to sustain the massive investment that we're seeing in data centers. But energy abundance and resilience is a significant factor in the location of business and industrial production, to your point.
Matt, really appreciate you being with us. What I love about what you guys do at Breakthrough, the intersection of supply chain, the intersection of energy, it's so important, and the energy supply chain is so important. We get the opportunity to cover it. Mm-hmm. What I like about what Matt does is he studies the economy, looking at freight data. He's one of our own, like of this community. Like, it's a small community of people looking at the data every day. Matt is one of those people. Matt, really appreciate you. I'm going to be up at Green Bay, by the way, in September. Hopefully we can connect when I come.
Perfect. That'd be wonderful. That'd be wonderful.
Dickman reached out last night.
Happy birthday. Yeah.
Yeah, happy birthday to FreightWaves. We'll be right back. We're going to talk about industrials. It's my favorite day of the week with the AAR report. We're going to talk about trains. Also, really cool stuff happening with Bill Stevens. Stay with us.
Race car drivers like NASCAR champion Jesse Love are a lot like commercial drivers, pros. But even the best in the world still watch the tape to see what they missed and get better next time. So we created the Samsara Driving Coach.
Great race, Jesse, but you were following too closely and you were speeding.
Okay, you got me on that one.
Samsara uses insights from millions of professional drivers to coach drivers in real time.
Because even champions need a coach.
Give me the keys.
What's the masterclass all about? Well, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you're a driver, you're an owner-operator, you're a fleet owner, whether you're in compliance services, dispatcher, no matter what it is, masterclass is for you. Every 2 weeks, you're going to sit down with me, and we're going to go over certain business topics that are related specifically to your small trucking company operations. We're going to help you with everything from compliance to how to negotiate better on the spot board, how to find direct freight, and everything in between. This is the reason why you don't want to miss out on Masterclass. It's about an hour to an hour and a half. And then on top of that, you'll have the library to you so that way you can always research and reflect back onto it. Don't miss out this opportunity. This is built specifically for you. I'm excited and I hope to see you in class.
Imagine a world where your freight moves as fast as a digital pulse. What if your visibility didn't just tell you where a truck was, but exactly where it needed to be 48 hours from now? Think of a logistics network that corrects its own mistakes before they cost you a single dime. What if your supply chain could think for itself? Imagine AI agents negotiating rates in milliseconds, predictive models that solve labor shortages before they even happen. This isn't science fiction, it's the agenda. On July 15th at the historic Old Post Office in Chicago, FreightWaves presents the Supply Chain AI Symposium. We are defining in real time how AI is embedded into every mile, every warehouse, and every handshake. Because in 2026, the future isn't just coming, it's already negotiating. The FreightWaves Supply Chain AI Symposium. Secure your spot now.
FreightWaves today, and before we get to this next segment, I just need to call you out for a second because what was that about Taylor Swift's cake?
What I'm talking about?
I don't know. It's, the way it came out, I literally I don't
even know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Is there some other meaning to that?
No, you know what? Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Anyways, probably not the show for whatever Malcolm's got.
Sorry, we keep talking about the truck. I'm sorry.
With the TikTok talk.
Well, that's why I'm here.
Okay,
that's why I'm here. I'm here to have
What is
your
on
back.
this playlist you keep obsessing over?
This
you keep thinking
playlist?
it's going to be on her playlist.
In terms of Taylor's? Or
Yeah.
No. There's going to be a lot, though.
You know who I'm a big fan of?
Who's that?
Is Gracie Abrams.
Okay, I can see.
I like it.
Yeah.
Now, wrong show.
Wrong show. Come on with the show.
It's
Let's
a
talk
holiday
about that.
week. We're allowed.
Yeah.
Let's talk about industrials because that's much more on point
Let's
than
do
Taylor
that.
Swift's wedding. Bill Stevens, welcome to FreightWaves today.
Thank you, Craig. Good to see you. It is really hot here in Massachusetts today. I'm pretty sure it's hot down in Chattanooga, but the other thing that's hot is U.S. intermodal volume. The AAR figures.
Boom!
Yes.
We like that. Tell us about it, Bill.
So the Association of American Railroads traffic figures for last week came out this morning, as they always do on a Wednesday. Intermodal volume was up in the U.S. 10% last week. That continues a hot streak of about 11% growth over the prior 4 weeks. So that is pretty much right on trend. Carloads were up as well, 3%. The last 4 weeks, they were up 2.1. So more or less in line there as well. So the total U.S. traffic was up about 7% this week. And the intermodal growth is really a U.S. story. In Canada, it was down 6% this week. And they've been negative for the past 4, and they're negative for the year. And so there's been this divergence. Mexico's up as well, but they are just a much, much, much smaller slice of the overall intermodal pie. And we can talk about this in a bit, but whenever railroads see unexpected volume surges like this, the networks tend to slow down. It's kind of the rush hour effect. But let's take a look at the U.S. carload segments. The biggest one is usually coal. That was flat. It's down 7% over the last 4 weeks. So not a bad week for coal traffic. Chemical traffic was up 2.4%. That's up from the 1.1% trend over the last 4 weeks. Grain is up about 6%. And that's down from a trend of about 18% for the past 4 weeks. But grain's just been strong all year long. Of note this week, a couple things stood out. Number one was metallic ores and metals. So that's the ingredients for steel as well as metal products. That was up 19.8%. And metallic ores are up 32%. Iron and steel scrap about 20, and coke up about 15. So that would indicate steel production is certainly rising. And also of note, lumber and wood products, which are obviously used in housing, up 8.4% this week. That's continuing a gain in lumber and wood traffic of about 14% over the last 4 weeks. So that's a look at the U.S. and rail traffic. And in Canada, the U.S. And Canadian carloads are running about neck and neck. There's not a big divergence there, like there is in intermodal. And when you look at intermodal train speeds, Rick Patterson, who's an independent analyst, he really closely follows railroad performance statistics going back years, and he's the go-to guy. His report, The State of the Rails, last week flagged a slowdown at the railroads because of the spike in intermodal volume. This is, pretty predictable. And when you look at the U.S. railroads, this week, CSX in the East was up 13%. Norfolk Southern, also in the East, was up 9%. In the West, you had BNSF up 11% and UP up about 9%. So this is really broad-based, depending on, it's not just an Eastern story. It's not just a Western story. It's both. And BNSF and UP intermodal train speeds, they were at a 10-month low last week, and NS is near a 20-month low. CSX is an outlier here. They're at a 7-year low for their intermodal train speeds. Usually this, there may be congestion around some intermodal terminals. It takes longer to load, longer to unload trains that are bigger and longer, obviously. Track work can come into play here as well. If you've got a key line that's out of service or has a track curfew on it that's a heavy intermodal corridor, that can certainly play a role here. And this is definitely track work season in the most dense intermodal sections of the CSX network. We don't know yet what's going on there because the railroads are in their quiet period. CSX leads off earnings on July 22nd. So we'll learn a lot more about these trends and intermodal in particular during those earnings calls. The railroads entered this year kind of with a low demand expectation. And so when they went to set their crew staffing levels, that's what it was based on. Nobody expected, a big surge. And it's really hard anyway to get your crew hiring and your crew staffing levels just right. To take Norfolk Southern for an example, they've got 95 separate crew terminals across their network in the East. And it doesn't take much to be off a little bit in one or two terminals where either attrition is higher than you expected or traffic came on higher than expected or both. And then once you get one terminal gummed up and you're short of crews, that slowly spreads outward from that terminal and leads to congestion and slowdowns. Rick Patterson did not expect this to mushroom into something broader unless unplanned recrews of intermodal trains siphoned off crews that are also needed for merchandise trains.
Bill, it's a lot to take in. I mean, I think the headline is that the commodities continue to increase, volumes increase. Intermodal is absolutely ripping. Canada, we talked about this earlier. Matt Munster, the chief economist at Breakthrough, we've talked about the fact that Canadian economy is not doing as well as the U.S. economy. It's just very structural. It doesn't feel like the rail freight is an indication of how strong the industrial segment is. Intermodal, I think, is driven by this sort of reconfiguration of supply chains where shippers were dependent upon truck capacity. They saw the massive increase in fuel prices, the tightening capacity, the hard to get capacity, and are putting more in intermodal, which is driving that market. What's your read?
Yeah, I would say that's right. The carload traffic in Canada is doing well, and it's I think, like I said, it's running slightly ahead of the U.S. But there is that intermodal divergence, and we'll have to dive into that when the railroads, CN and CPKC, have their earnings calls at the end of the month.
Bill, any updates on our merger? The biggest wedding, second biggest wedding in America. Probably not going to be this year. It's next year's biggest wedding. What is your thoughts?
The biggest update came actually from a U.S. Supreme Court ruling this week. President Trump had dismissed several members of supposedly independent regulatory bodies. One of those regulators, Rebecca Slaughter from the Federal Trade Commission, had sued, saying that her dismissal fell outside of the bounds of what a president is allowed to do in terms of dismissing independent regulators. The High Court ruled that no, that this was a constitutional move. Robert Primus, he was a Democratic member of the Surface Transportation Board. He was dismissed last year on the same grounds, no reason given. So that ends his challenge, really, to get back on the board on these constitutional grounds. He's continuing to challenge this on racial discrimination grounds. But the bigger picture here, beyond that, is there are some people in the rail community who feel that the board will now face political pressure. If you're a member of the Surface Transportation Board, you're reviewing a merger, and if the president supports it, the feeling is this may tilt the balance in favor of approving the merger. Now, before this High Court ruling came out on Monday, you had former STB Chairman Marty Oberman saying, no, the board is fiercely independent. They're going to look at this and take a fact-based review and base it on all the data and whether it's, in fact, in the public interest and enhances competition. And CPKC CEO Keith Creel, who went through a merger review in 2023 and 2022 when Canadian Pacific acquired Kansas City Southern, agrees and says they're incredibly data-driven and they're going to focus just totally on the issue at hand and not look at this from a political standpoint. And analyst Tony Hatch points out that this is just kind of one of those strange things where it's a business battle. It's between some shippers, particularly chemical shippers, have come out in opposition to this merger. And then you've got railroads, which are actually smaller than most of their customers in terms of revenue and market cap, looking to combine to become bigger. And so it's this intra-business fight. So it should be interesting to see how it turns out and what the STB has to say about its independence.
Bill, I cannot believe that we are already halfway through 2026. We're officially kicking off a new quarter today, Q3. And with that, what has your attention most? I know we talked with Julie last week, and the passion that you have, it really does speak volumes for just who you are and what you do. But what is just really front and center of mind for you right now as we head into Q3?
It'll be interesting to see what the railroads say about their outlook for the rest of the year, because the picture has been brightening. They were kind of gloomy, in their first quarter calls about their outlook for this year, which you can understand after being in a multi-year freight doldrums and thinking, oh, the turnaround is the next half of the year, or the next quarter, and it just never happened. Now you have this spike in fuel prices, and all of a sudden intermodal is on a tear. Will that continue? Is it entirely dependent on fuel prices? Can they maintain their service levels? That is the big question. And Rick Patterson put it, there's no point celebrating a 10% intermodal gain now if you give back 9% of it next year. So we've seen this movie before, where traffic is down. The railroads furlough crew members to make their resources in line with the current business levels and their projected business levels. And then because of the delay that's built into the hiring process, it takes 6 months to hire and train a conductor, and even longer for them to become efficient. It's just hard to capture all that volume, run your network well, well traffic is coming, and it's an unexpected surge.
Yeah, it does feel like you point out how there's a perception change, but it's because we can't have nice things, Bill. When you have been in this miserable freight recession every single time we thought we were over it, like I famously said, rest in peace, freight recession in 24. So wrong. And people like to remind me of that.
Oh, all the time.
But
all the time.
We're clearly out of it. By the way, you had Jason Miller, who actually agreed with me. That was, this is big news. That was maybe the biggest merger of all, at least in freight. Bill, I got to ask about passenger rail. We know that your passion lies with trains, all kinds. You did the big boy, by the way, if people have not picked up or have not received the latest issue of Trains, you dive into it. But I want to talk about passenger rail because what we've seen in Florida with Brightline, where are we at right now?
Brightline's kind of a tale of two railroads built into one. Its debt structure is unsustainable. They have restructured it to buy themselves some more time. That said, they're hitting all-time revenue and ridership numbers for their corridor, which, if you're not familiar with it, runs from Miami up to Orlando. And it's doing well. People like the trains. It's reliable. As a passenger rail advocate, and I was hoping that this would be a great example of perhaps how a private sector passenger operator could succeed. And that may very well not happen. And the lesson may be that it's very hard to turn a profit in a passenger rail operation. And that has been the lesson from all around the world, really, wherever your passenger system is.
Yeah, and they had the benefit of Florida East Coast, sort of the providing the infrastructure, and I believe they were the sort of one of the founding investors in that business. And by the way, thank you for being kind, because I keep saying Brightline. There is a parking lot owner here in Chattanooga. That's the name of the company. And I always say it, and he's always kind of doesn't correct me and say Brightline, because that's what it's called. And I always get it mixed up. It's the second time I've done it.
What is that called in your brain that makes you do that? There's something.
I don't know.
I don't know
it's
the
same
term.
thing that was given me to say, not to say the pirate version of Sarah or Sarah. See,
You just did it. You just did it.
I can't get our primary sponsor. It's not good. Speaking of sponsors, we have a sponsor for our weekly rail report, which is Trinity Rail. They're going to be busy leasing out cars because companies that don't want to make long-term capital investments are going to need all this incremental capacity. With this great rail report, there is nothing more fitting than going out and expanding your fleet. Bill, what do you think is going to happen in terms of capacity growth on the bulk side? Do we think these rail operators are going to end up expanding their fleet and leasing more capacity to take advantage of these opportunities?
Well, about around 70% of the freight car fleet is leased by shippers. It's not rail owned. And what shippers are saying at this point, based on my read of the numbers, is carload orders for new builds are below replacement level. So the fleet is going to get smaller, not bigger, if that trend continues. Because the car fleets are retiring faster than they're being built. There's a little bit of a wrinkle in there that the new cars are bigger, higher capacity than the old cars that they're replacing that are 30, 40, 50 years old. But it's still a net reduction in the fleet size. So if we're going to see meaningful carload growth, you have high fleet utilization already in the lease fleet. And so you would think that there would have to be a catch up in building certain car types that are in demand.
Yeah, and Trinity is great for that. I mean, it provides the flexible for shippers that really need that flexible capacity that they can't get it directly from the railroads or the rail cars. Bill, we've got a big event coming up at the end of the month.
That's right. We do.
First Trains Pro Future of Rail Symposium. What are we going to talk about here? By the way, we moved it virtual largely due to scheduling. It was going to be in middle of July. By the way, the heat is going to be insane.
Yeah.
So we're doing a benefit, trying to save the air condition for you, our people, so they can stay at home. But anyways, we've moved it to virtual. It's going to be virtual. We got some great guests. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so Patrick Fuchs, the chairman of the STB, will give the keynote address first thing. And then live in the studio, I will be chatting with Union Pacific CEO Jim Vena and Norfolk Southern CEO Mark George about their merger. And that should be interesting because it comes the day after they are supposed to file more information that the Surface Transportation Board has requested. I'll be talking about the intersection of rail technology and federal regulations with the FRA and the AAR. We'll have some of the top management people from a couple of the autonomous railcar startup companies. We'll have C-suite executives from some of the other Class 1 railroads like BNSF, as well as executives from CSX and CN. To talk about industrial development, particularly on CSX. That's been a big story for them. It'll be interesting to find out, one of the things that's been coming out lately is that sites that were initially intended to be rail served now are landing data centers because data centers need lots of land. And so that takes away an opportunity for rail carload served sites. So what does that mean in the big picture and when you look longer term?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a great lineup. It's really, and if you love rail and you love thinking about where it's going in the future, it's an insane lineup. And congratulations for putting an insane, amazing lineup together. So if you're an investor or you're a shipper or you're someone interested in the future of rail, this is the event, which means you don't have to travel to Chattanooga, Tennessee in the middle of July, or late July, I should say.
Toasty.
But we were able to accommodate some fantastic speakers and thought leaders on where this is all headed. And I think, look, all eyes, as you mentioned, are on the major merger, the biggest merger in rail history. And I looked it up, it's like a top 10 merger in American history, period. So this is a massive, massive event. And it's going to reshape the entire freight market. I have to ask, Bill, the conversation around intermodal is ripping. There's some sort of market developments for that with trucking and sort of the tightness there and fuel. But the idea that these two major intermodal providers, these two major railroads together would get transcontinental, what is your sort of read in terms of how shippers will sort of deal with that and sort of embrace it? You mentioned, obviously, the bulk commodity shippers are not happy about it, but it seems like the intermodal shippers should be pretty excited.
That's right. Your big intermodal providers like Hub Group, they and Schneider, they have spoken favorably of the merger because it will enable them to offer, single line service, and which is much simpler for everyone. Some of the smaller intermodal marketing companies haven't really staked out a position, but they're unsure because it potentially complicates their lives a bit. And they really want to make sure that all intermodal lanes remain open. One of the questions I have, and a lot of people have, is can they achieve these growth numbers of 2.1 million trucks taken off the road? And what's the intermodal strategy going to be going forward? Railroads have typically used their networks to the fullest advantage. So if you're Union Pacific, that means getting those beautiful 2,000-mile hauls from LA to Chicago. If you're Norfolk Southern and your maximum length of haul is 900 miles, well, a 500-mile haul doesn't look terrible, and you do it. Union Pacific wouldn't even really look at a domestic 500-mile haul. And then you go all the way down to Florida East Coast, a 351-mile regional in Florida, and they do short haul intermodal that's shorter than their 350-mile railroad. So what's the strategy going to be going forward? Are UP and NS going to go after these shorter lengths of haul where most freight moves, or are they just going to focus on the longer hauls? There's certainly plenty of business there. JB Hunt has identified 7 to 11 million potential dry van truckload moves that follow routes across the West and they think are divertible to highway, and that would double, more than double BNSF's intermodal volume.
Yeah, there's nobody knows intermodal better than JB Hunt, and particularly the transition from truck to intermodal. Just a massive success story. I know that intermodal really impacted your business. You guys were one of the leaders in long-haul trucking in the old days, in the good old days when you could make money on that. But between intermodal and brokerage, it totally obliterated that market.
Well, actually, before the big rail mergers in the late 90s, we did a lot of Southern California to points east, and as that merger, they had a meltdown for about 3 years, but once the merger was completed and they got their act together, then that freight volume moved relatively fast over about a year from truck into intermodal. Very fast transition. Part of what moved it fast was the fuel prices in 2003 basically surged, and you saw a big movement towards intermodal. And a lot of people got introduced to intermodal at that point that had never used intermodal. And some of those people continue to use intermodal quite a bit today.
Yeah, I've said that really, with this fuel surge, like as shippers discover intermodal, we talked about Amazon.
Yes, we have.
Moving into intermodal, but as they discover it, because Amazon's going to go down market, I think, then really probably not go after the same customers that, a JB Hunt is after. They're probably going to go down market. But as companies discover, as customers discover the power of intermodal, it's hard to get them to deconvert. I mean, we learned that in the trucking business. You helped build BNSF's intermodal business, because I remember I was there. And unfortunately, they got greedy and took some of that business away.
Well, in a short period of time, we built about a $400 million intermodal operation, and then tore it down in about 6 weeks, about 5 years later.
Well, it's because they wanted a rate increase. I went out, I was with you on a tour. They took us out to Glacier National Park in the middle of Montana. And it was like, we're going through the Yellowstone Club and stuff. It's all beautiful. We're in this rail car bill. That's sort of like BNSF's, like you may have been on it. And we're middle of Glacier National Park. And they shut the train down. This is like the craziest thing. And I don't think they realize the optics of this, but we made a point to let them know this is really uncomfortable. They stopped the train.
Okay.
So they could have a conversation. We're in the middle of a national park, probably 50 miles from the nearest city. And they're like, hey, we need a rate increase. And we're like, what do we say no? So anyways, that was my crazy story. That was in the days that trailer on flat car were really a thing. TOFC was a big deal, much bigger than container. Bill, we love having you. We love having you every week. We're super excited. He's so bullish, or at least that's what the data says.
That's what the
Thanks
data
for coming
says.
back. We'll come back. We'll have you next week, every week. And look, do not miss, Bill Stevens is an amazing writer, an amazing editor, and every single month, Trains Magazine issues a new release, plus daily activity. You can get it on Trains Pro to sign up. It's a digital subscription, trying to bring really the stories of both people that love the railroads and the consumers behind it, and just the rail fans, but also a business perspective. And it's really, Bill has done an amazing job of really bringing those rail conversations, because so much is happening.
He does such a phenomenal job.
He does an amazing job. And like, rail is the most interesting. I tell you, it's my favorite day of the week is Wednesday.
Love it.
I love getting the American Association Rail Report, because it gives us the truth about the industrial demand. It isn't skewed by driver, availability. It's not skewed by some of these sort of trucking developments. It's really an important thing. So every Wednesday, we will be going through the American Association of Railroad Report. Tune in tomorrow. We've got OIDA with us. We've got more conversations about the U-turn lawsuit, and we have the armchair attorney. That's tomorrow. FreightWaves Today at noon Eastern.